In the wake of Edge of Fate dropping, and players considering a lot of the system changes for this expansion as being kind of a soft Destiny 3, where it's almost a D3 level of system change, but, of course, being introduced into Destiny 2 as opposed to an actual new title, and also given the conversation around Bungie, which is much more widespread than just the Destiny and Bungie communities, right? Especially with the news that we had from Marathon, the stolen art drama, and how that kind of spread further into the gaming space where folks who don't actually play Bungie games have a lot of opinions about Bungie as a result, which I should say are probably fair in a way because, of course, it sounds pretty terrible when a company is accused of actually stealing art for a new IP. It triggers a lot of interesting responses, but in relation to Destiny and the potential of a D3, there's been a clip circulating around on social media from the Dropped Frames podcast, where the hosts discuss that desire for a D3 inside of the community, and how it's essentially considered to be a major throw that Bungie haven't gone ahead and actually produced a new Destiny title. So let's check out the clip right here.
It seems to, like, it's so hard to not look at Bungie and not look at the state of Destiny 2 right now and think, like, if they would have ended Destiny 2 a year ago when they finished their big 10-year story and dropped Destiny 3 and restart that thing, like, that seems like a sure... We're not game CEO, but that seems like a sure win.
What's even crazier about that?
Once again, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say, Julia, once again, right on the money. All they had to do was Destiny 3.
Yeah.
That's all they had to do.
I mean, that is kind of true. It is all they had to do is Destiny 3. I mean, if you look at the final shape, how well that expansion performed, and, of course, how big Destiny 2 was as a title, especially when it launched, theoretically, D3 could have been an absolutely massive game. It is worth mentioning, though, when folks say all they had to do is the Destiny 3. Actually, we've seen historically that producing a new IP, especially in the Destiny space for Bungie, is a massive amount of work. When we look back to Destiny 1, obviously they were developing the engine and a lot of the systems. That was a massive amount of work, which took years and years to actually get Destiny 1 off the ground. And I think really it was similar with Destiny 2. The difference between now and then, though, is that Bungie had the support of third-party publishers, right? Activision in Destiny 1 and D2, and more specifically having 2 additional studios that actually helped them get those games off the ground. I think it was Vicarious Visions that made the D2 PC version, but High Moon and Vicarious Visions were also producing expansion content that helped to produce certain elements of The Taken King and Rise of Iron, which obviously at the time was enabling Bungie to go ahead and start working on Destiny 2 as the first game wrapped up over the first couple of years. But on top of having a lot of cash lying around, additional studios helping out, Bungie was also probably around twice the size of what it is today. So I think that is a massive component of why Bungie didn't go ahead with a Destiny 3. And it's definitely worth keeping that in mind.
And what's even wilder is, like, not only is that all they had to do, they were clearly at least okay at doing it. They had a full player base. Their players wanted that. They were asking for it. It's like you literally had a layup at that point. Like, all you had to do, your player base was like, just give it to us and we'll make you successful. And Bungie was like, no.
We're not Destiny 3.
We're not going to do that.
Destiny 3.
We'd rather give you, instead of giving you what you want, we'd rather give you
here we go.
a bunch of other people's art in a rehashed game you've already played 20 times.
Oh, man.
Yeah?
That's definitely true as well. Bungie decided that it was a good bet to go ahead and produce Marathon as an extraction shooter. I'm guessing that decision ranges back at least a handful of years at this point. So when players of Destiny say, we didn't get D3 because Bungie decided to make Marathon, I would argue that it isn't necessarily entirely true, but it is definitely partially true. It's not the only component, but again, especially when we look to now, Bungie are a smaller company than what they were 10 years ago, and there is additionally Marathon in the mix, which, considering the reception to Marathon, and how Marathon also appears to be a pretty bare bones product, right, in terms of the actual scope of the title, it definitely demonstrates the fact that Bungie have overstretched in wanting to deliver on both of those IPs, because ultimately the end result has been a Destiny title that's getting less content moving forward. That's partially because it's also Destiny 2, so the game essentially isn't growing like it might if they were to produce a Destiny 3. Then on the flip side, there's actually an even smaller team, as far as I understand it, that have been producing producing Marathon. And I think we can essentially safely say that Marathon has been underfunded in terms of actual resource, time investment, and Bungie creating an environment where that game has the potential to succeed, right? So while I don't necessarily agree that just making Destiny 3 is the answer, because a significant amount of lift is actually required in order to make that work, it's definitely true that this is the result of poor management at the upper levels of Bungie.
Sounds pretty good.
I mean, that's the second trend that they chased, right? They chased Concord for live service, and then they chased the like Tarkov style game with Marathon, and that's not even out, but it seems pretty dead in the water.
So you think you want Destiny 3, but you don't. I didn't even play Destiny 2. I know that Destiny 3 was wanted because of how many Destiny players I heard screaming for it.
Yeah.
I'm not even a Destiny player, and I knew people wanted Destiny 3. I mean, some people just, they like living in that world. It's like, it's where they want to be. So they want more of it. And it's like, Bungie was just like, no, or you don't get more of it.
Yeah.
So now they're all finding other games instead of being in Destiny 3.
Dude, it is kind of depressingly true, let's be real. Paul Tassi made a good response to this. Again, absolutely true, it's a mistake not to be doing a Destiny 3. I agree with that, but that decision is now years old, and I think we're kind of past the point where it's feasible for Bungie to do it. But also, launching it a year after Final Shape would have literally been impossible. And he highlights again the Activision era, they were double the size and had 2 support studios as well as not trying to produce Marathon at the same time. So I think we've established that Bungie producing a Destiny 3 was something that would have been very difficult to do in their current kind of setup. And it would have required a significant amount of time, probably without any content for Destiny 2, right? At least a couple of years off, if not longer, to actually produce a D3, where I think it would as well have been worth Bungie kind of future-proofing that title in terms of engine upgrades and the tech to make sure that they could continue to support that game for years and years to come, because we know that's an issue. And it's one of the reasons we've seen things like sunsetting. But also, we know that it makes it hard for Bungie to quickly iterate on Destiny because of their sort of engine limitations. So it's an interesting conversation. Going back to folks who've played Destiny a lot though, Glad said it's wild to hear this and feel the validation from folks who don't even play Destiny or barely do. Bungie not resetting everything and dropping a Destiny 3 will always be the biggest throw of all time and a huge head scratcher for the rest of my life. And I honestly do agree with that. Like, historically, Destiny is a proven franchise. While it's been a lot of work and kind of complicated for Bungie to keep afloat in some respects, we shouldn't understate just how huge the Destiny IP has been over the years, and ultimately what is a lost opportunity in the fact that Bungie haven't made the decision to work towards a Destiny 3. But when we look back at the reports after the Final Shape with the second round of layoffs, that's where we learned that Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy had left the company after the cancellation of their Destiny spin-off game, which was codenamed Project Payback. And I believe Bungie were looking at doing a different type of Destiny game because they felt that it was a big risk investing into a Destiny 3, given what they'd learned through the kind of development cycle of Destiny in general. I would argue, though, it was an even bigger risk investing significantly into the extraction shooter space, right? Because while that genre was absolutely popping off at the time that Bungie decided to make Marathon, I think the other component is that after 5 years of development, that whole sort of space had changed, right? Not only that, but the competition is significant, right? You've got other extraction shooters or similar types of products which have been around for a really long time, either having very successful initial launches, things like Apex Legends, which I know is more of a battle royale, but it's sort of in a similar space. And that's in contrast to things like Tarkov, which have developed over a longer period of time and developed a really significant player base, right? So Marathon arguably was an even bigger gamble. And for Destiny players, I think it will be one of the elements that players will have a really hard time in actually forgiving Bungie for, right, in that respect. So the final thing I would talk about is the conversation regarding Destiny 3 and Sony. Given that we know that Sony are slowly absorbing Bungie, essentially, it's not a total takeover yet, but that basically seems to be on the cards in the long term, especially if, or maybe more like when, Marathon struggles to perform the way that Sony want it to, and presumably even Destiny on this basis isn't performing at the levels that either of those companies would want. So it's almost inevitable that Sony will take control over Bungie. But does that mean we'll get a Destiny 3? Well, I think the problem now is that that may also be a really big risk for Sony, right? If Marathon does flop and Destiny 2 is still struggling and not producing the kind of revenues that they want, firstly, if Sony do decide to make a Destiny 3, that would take years and years, and we would quite possibly see no support for Destiny 2 in the meantime. But I also think there's a serious possibility that Sony would basically just cut their losses, right? Because if they've lost money on the Destiny IP initially, then also lost money on the Marathon IP, they'll have a choice to say, well, do we gamble again and try and do the D3 thing, or do we cut our losses, take all of the dev talent at Bungie, which we shouldn't forget is world-class talent, right? There is a lot that Sony could do with that talent by moving them into other studios, and we've already seen examples of that. I think there was a big chunk of developers from Bungie that are now working on other things at Sony, and Sony also took over the Gummy Pears IP, which I think is some kind of MOBA-style title that Bungie were developing, but Sony are essentially finishing. I personally believe that Sony will take that approach, take the dev talent, take Bungie's real estate and other assets, and actually cut their losses. I feel like that's probably more likely to happen than a Destiny 3, which may sound incredibly negative, but I do think it's a real possibility, especially in a space where live service is getting harder and harder to actually produce and keep players engaged with in a way that's significant enough to generate the revenue that makes it worthwhile. So I just thought it was an interesting conversation, guys. You'll have to give me your thoughts down below. Do you think we'll ever see a Destiny 3, or do you think it's too late at this point? I'd be curious to get your thoughts on what you think might happen with Bungie and Sony's relationship, or indeed whether Sony might be the ones to finally pull the trigger on a D3 and actually do it in the future. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. For today, I thought it was an interesting conversation, so if you've enjoyed the video, a rating really does help me out. Also be sure to get subscribed and I'll keep you posted with more Destiny content, because yeah, I'm still playing D2 at the moment, and I want to see how the rest of this year pans out, so I'm along for the ride essentially, even if it makes me a bit of a fool. I'm enjoying myself though, so I think it kind of works for the moment. Either way, thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys very soon.